I'm Carl Ruhlman. I'm here to introduce our speaker. Many of you have that favorite columnist that you turn to first when you read your morning paper. You know, Charles Krauthammer on Fridays, Walter Williams on Sundays, etc. Our speaker this evening, Peter Bronson, was the local columnist I turned to first. His columns were always worded in a distinctive way and especially stimulating and artful. Peter was the editorial page editor and columnist for the Cincinnati Enquirer for 20 years. And under his leadership, the Enquirer was judged Best Editorial Page in Ohio 4 years in a row. Before coming to Cincinnati, he held a similar position at the Tucson Citizen in Tucson, Arizona. Started his journalism career in Michigan after graduating from Michigan State in his hometown of East Lansing, Michigan. He served on several nonprofits and currently serves as a board member at Cincinnati Right to Life. He was a regular panelist and producer on Channel 9 WCPO TV host show Hot Seat. He's now a contributing editor and columnist at Cincy Magazine, where he has contributed feature articles on the Jeff Ruby family, John Bader, the Widmer murder trial, congressional candidate Brad Wenstrup, Butler County politician Mike Fox, and the Occupy movement, where he wrote, "Occupy Wall Street is a junkyard magnet for every loose wingnut, burned out eco light bulb, and bent silver spoon in America's junk drawer." Peter is active. Peter is active as a Bible study participant and leader at Horizon Community Church. He enjoys working on his vintage British Roadster. Next time, buy American, okay? He enjoys playing golf and travel. He's a father of two, lives in Loveland with his wife, Kathy. Please join me in a liberal Tea Party welcome to Peter Bronson.
That was almost true. Thank you, Carl. That was very kind. Thanks for the kind welcome. I should caution, I don't do a lot of this anymore because, well, as most of you know, I don't perpetrate daily journalism anymore. I left the Enquirer 3 years ago, and on that day, 101 people were laid off. As far as I know, I was the only conservative. So, see, 100 to 1, that's about typical in a newsroom.
1%.
Yep. So, but I did want to make an exception for the Tea Party because I really admire the group and I think you're doing great work and I really want to support you. So, as a matter of fact, the other day I was asked by my editor at Cincy Magazine to write another story, which will be coming out in October, and the question was, who is the Tea Party? So I got together and I met with Carl and I met with George Nafziger and Ann Becker and some others that I know, and I see a lot of you here that are familiar faces. And I also see here tonight, you know, I see some of my friends and my neighbors. In fact, I think I've got enough golf buddies here to make a foursome. And so that is the Tea Party. It's people next door. It's your neighbors. It's elected officials you've supported and campaigned for and voted for. It's the good people who are really trying to make changes in this country. It's what I would call the Midwest's leading export, which is good neighbors. And for, by and large, I would guess that most of you probably have never been that politically active. You probably never did much more besides vote until now. And so when I see people rise up and start taking real interest in their future, this is what we all were taught in government and civics class, is what the American way is supposed to be. So when I see the liberals that I know in the media afraid of the Tea Party, and many are, they're very panicked, and you can see it. You can tell by the stories, the way this group is treated. But look around you. Look around you tonight. That's the Tea Party. It's people you know in your community. And when I look in the mirror, I see somebody who agrees with just about everything the Tea Party has done. So I just wanted to let you know that the story I'm going to try and tell is that is the Tea Party. So I don't know if that's going to make a dent, though, because I see more and more these days that there are really two cultures in America, and they're talking in two different directions, and their words don't even compute. People can talk to me, and I'm not sure we even share the same planet, much less the same set of facts. But you can tell, again, by the coverage that the media are worried about this, and I think it's really hurting the media the way they have covered the Tea Party more than it hurts the Tea Party. Because most of you have neighbors, most of you have friends, I hope, and they know you. They may know you're politically active in this. They may not be as active, but they know who you are, and they know you're not a scary person. They know you're not some survivalist nut. So, you know, people know by their gut that the media stories that portray this and make this gross distortion are wrong. So what I'd like to propose is that once you get done saving the country, if you're looking for another project, I think it's time to take back the press and make it what it's supposed to be. And when I came into the business, and I hate to be one of these guys, you know, back when I was a youngster in the news business, you know, horses behaved themselves in the streets or whatever. But really, the media have changed so much, and it is such a different business today. The standards that we aspire to of objectivity, of fairness, of balanced stories, they're just not there anymore. And it drives me crazy when I sit there and read my Enquirer in the morning and think about canceling my subscription. Here's somebody who went to school in journalism school, who spent more than 30 years in this business and admired it and respected it and tried to give it everything it was supposed to be. And then I'm thinking about canceling my local paper because the stories are so dishonest and unfair. There's something wrong with that. So, let me tell you, here's the things to watch for. I would call these the top 10 tools of media bias. I'm going to help you get ready here to take back the media one of these days. The first one I see in the local papers so common is called lobbying for levies. You know the stories. The news reporter goes out and finds a public agency that has a levy, and that public agency finds one person who might or might not be affected if they don't get their levy passed. And they tell a sob story. Not going to get new shoes. Not going to be able to get to work. Not going to do, you know, the ultimate expression of this was the year when the zoo came in for their levy. And the president of the zoo told us at the editorial board that if they couldn't pass their levy, they couldn't support the elephants. And we said, my gosh, that's pretty serious. What will happen to the elephants? And he said, well, nobody wants them. They'd have to be destroyed. Oh. Can you believe it? Pass the levy or we kill the elephants.
They're Republicans.
Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. So, I mean, this is basically the tone of lobbying for levies. It's like the old National Lampoon cover with the dog on the cover, and they got the gun next to the dog's head, if you remember that one, and it says, buy this magazine or we kill the dog. You know, that's lobbying for levies. And, you know, implicit in every one of those stories, they are so predictable and so cliche and such lazy reporting. Implicit in every one of them is that the only victims ever are people who take government services, not the taxpayer. And that the only solution to every problem, more government, more spending, more taxes. The next one is last word for liberals. Now you've seen this in so many stories. You follow the story all the way to the jump. Even if the story seems very balanced, guess who gets the last word every time? The guy who's ripping Josh Mandel. The guy who hates Rob Portman. The guy who can't stand George Bush. The guy who hates Mitt Romney. The guy who has a bone to pick with Paul Ryan. You know, you see it every time. Whether it's local officials right on up the ladder, they always engineer the story so that their side gets the last word. The next one I love, and this is becoming such a joke, is left-wing referees. These are the guys they publish these stories called things like PolitiFact or Fact Check, and yet they're total opinion pieces. You know, somebody did an analysis recently of the PolitiFact stories in the Sherrod Brown-Mandel race, and they found that only one candidate invariably has been accused of pants on fire lying. Guess who? Josh Mandel. And in many of the cases where they accused him of lying, it was a subjective matter of opinion. But when they turned around and found an actual misstatement of fact by Sherrod Brown, they cut him some slack. They said, mostly true. And these are the guys you're going to trust to be the referees? Come on. The next one is, and this is more of a cultural thing, I suppose, and it goes saturated through our entire culture, and that is the declining lack of morals. You know, there's an assumption in so much of our coverage these days that anybody objects to something that's transgressive, offensive, way outside the usual borders, that you're a prude, that you're a square. And that those who defend tradition, they are passé, they're old-fashioned, they're not with it. And it's just a basic flavor. And you've probably seen it. You've seen it in the coverage, for example, of the Chick-fil-A. And, you know, those people, what we have, they played it as if it was just an equal protest. On one side, you had 9 or 10 people show up. On the other side, 9 or 10 million.
At least.
The next one is loose security. Have you noticed how only conservatives get vetted? Do you know how many people were assigned to look through Sarah Palin's trash? Hundreds. Do you know how many were assigned to go look for Barack Obama's campus records in college? Zero. Zero. So only the conservatives get vetted. And here's something else interesting. Only the Tea Party gets accused of violence. I mean, you take Occupy Wall Street on one side, real violence, rape, beatings, vandalism,
Murder.
health risks, on and on it goes. On the other side, a completely pristine, clean record by the Tea Party. And which one is the first one ABC News runs to blame for the Batman shooting? The next one is lies, lies, and more lies. This is where you keep hearing from our media that the rich don't pay their fair share. Although the basic statistics can be found anywhere within 1 or 2 clicks. You know, the government statistics themselves from the IRS show that the top 1 or 2% pays a hugely disproportionate share of taxes. And the bottom 50% pay virtually nothing. But then we keep hearing it. We keep hearing Democratic Party talking points are reported as fact. And when Republicans come up with fact, they are treated as opinion and said to be wrong. The next one is they leave out the whole story. One of the most astonishing examples was just a week ago, and that was the day I nearly did cancel my subscription. And that was the one in which the whole story was about how Mitt Romney was being very harsh in his attack on Barack Obama, and it never once mentioned the very reason he was responding, which was Joe Biden's comment about, I'm going to put you all in chains. Never quoted him, never mentioned it, but the whole reason Romney was worked up was because of that quote. Now, how can you tell people just the response and not tell them what started it? It's just not right. The next one is lousy polling. In one example in August, CBS New York Times polled 36% Democrats and 27% Republicans. That's a 9% edge. If that poll had accurately reflected the people who voted in the previous election, it would have been 51% to 45% Republican. And Mitt Romney would have won the poll by 54%. Instead, it showed Obama with the big lead over Romney. It's just dishonest. They're stacking the deck. The next one is the ludicrous double standard. Just ask yourself, suppose that put you all in chains, complete with the phony urban accent, had been said by a Republican. Can you imagine the media outrage? Suppose Bush had gone on television bragging about killing Al-Qaeda leaders the way Obama bragged about Bin Laden. You know, they had a fit when he even used pictures of his famous speech on the rubble of the World Trade Center. You know, if anybody had a right to do it, he did.
Yeah.
Suppose the GOP had cut 700 and some billion from Medicare. Would you hear about it? What if Romney was found to be linked to domestic terrorists and radical anti-American pastors? Would you hear about it? Every day. On and on it goes. So here's the good news. It is changing. As these bloggers tonight pointed out, a big part of that is the citizen journalism that is beginning to hold the mainstream media accountable. You know, in so many of these cases, I don't know if you're following some of the latest stories from Joe Arpaio. I knew him when I was in Arizona, and he's a real character. He makes Silas look like a liberal. So I would love to do some of the things Joe is doing, like put his prisoners in pink underwear. And he only lets, he said they hit the ACLU made him watch TV. He said you got to put TV in all the cells, so he put it on Animal Planet. That's all they get. So, but if you're following that news, it's that kind of citizen journalism that sparked his investigation that is now discovered and provides convincing evidence you can't read anywhere, unfortunately, unless you go looking for it, that the birth certificate that's being used by Obama is actually 7 or 8 layers of Photoshop, and it's not even a real document, it never was. Now what that means, I do not know. But if that were a Republican candidate, if that were Sarah Palin, if that were Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan, you know you'd be hearing about it. There wouldn't be just 100 reporters digging through that trash. So this kind of thing is changing, and a lot of the credit goes to the bloggers, the people who are finding flaws and mistakes in the stories, and then it turns around and becomes, the media becomes the story. Here's another thing that's changing. I think there's a changing of the guard in the Republican Party happening right now, and it's a very refreshing thing. The old attitude was very patrician, it was gentlemanly, it was, you play on a high level, and you take the high road, and you just try to ignore the media bias because there's nothing you can do about it. You rarely ever heard anybody, like either of the Bush presidents, say anything about media bias. Very rarely. However, the new one, attitude, is more like what's happening with John Sununu. You know, he's out there challenging reporters directly. I don't know if you saw him say to Soledad O'Brien, he said, if you're going to keep repeating Democratic talking points, put an Obama bumper sticker on your forehead. You know, when you give it back, they cannot take it. It used to be the old approach was just to accept the bias and move on. But the new approach is more like what Gingrich did during the debates when he challenged the moderators and the assumptions in their questions and gave them a lesson right there on the spot. And it was popular. It resonated with people. People are tired of the bias, they're tired of the dishonesty, and they want to see a change. The old attitude was never ever pick a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel. Well, in the newsroom, we loved that. You know, we've made us feel invincible because if you came after us, we would just really come back. But you know what today, most people have realized, because of the declining power and influence and credibility of the mainstream media, that media watchdog is more of a toothless chihuahua. It's just not what it used to be. Now, is it still hugely influential? Absolutely. The day of the mainstream media is not over yet. But I'm really enjoying some things that are very subtle but effective. Take a look at the way the Romney campaign is using the icons of the liberal media, the TV anchors and the reporters, in his own ads.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. What are they going to say? Well, that was all wrong. I was lying. I'm the media. Yeah, blame the media.
Don't blame me, I was
What can
lying.
they do? And it's so effective because to the left and to the independent voters, it's an unimpeachable source. And to the rest of us who know what's going on, we just laugh.
Yeah.
You know, finally, giving it back. And I like the way with Paul Ryan, so far, knock on wood, the usual media tricks are not working. They haven't been able to find anything, deep, dark secrets in his past, or, I mean, like I say, knock on wood, everybody has feet to play. They can't call him stupid, like Dan Quayle. They can't say he's unprepared, like Sarah Palin, or unready. He's obviously prepared. He's obviously very smart. I mean, you just listen to him and you know, head-to-head in a debate with the president, much less Joe Biden. So that's a positive change. And one other thing that is cultural, but take a look how today, and I notice these things, having been a reporter and editor for so long, take a look at how these people are portrayed in your pop culture, in your movies and TV shows. When is the last time you saw a positive representation of anybody from the media? It doesn't happen anymore. They're blow-dried, shallow, arrogant, pushy, dishonest, cutting corners, cheating, sort of realistic in some ways. But here's my suggestion. If you really want to take part in this and try and take back the media, call them up and call them out. Do what these bloggers suggested. Go to the comments page, give them hell. Drive them crazy, because they've been driving us crazy for years, right? Yeah. Look in the paper, look at the names and numbers for the editor and the publisher, and call them. Call a reporter. If you don't get a satisfactory answer, say, well, I'm going to call your editor. I'll tell you, that puts the fear of God in it. It does. If you don't get a satisfactory answer from the editor, say, I'm calling the publisher. If you don't get a satisfactory answer from the publisher, you call Gannett Corporate Headquarters. You know how I know this works? People did it to me. And you don't want that to happen, let me tell you. Because even if you're 100% right, and I always was, they can really make your life miserable, because you have to fill out form after form explaining exactly how it was reported, send copies of every story, and nobody likes that level of scrutiny, and I don't think many of them can withstand it. So, there's my suggestion, and finally I would like to offer just a few words in defense of President Obama. First of all, you know, people have said he doesn't have a birth certificate. I think he has dozens. Remember, he also gave us our first balanced budget. It's the first time in which the debt equals our entire economy. And even Obama said this week that the candidate for the presidency should be an open book. Hear, hear. Let's tell the press to finally get started and open that book. So I urge you to do so, and I'd be glad to take a few questions if we have time. We have time?
Why is the media so afraid of the Tea Party, and also why do they tend to be so liberal? Is it because that's what they learned in college, or is that...
Well, I used to say, you know, most people I knew in the media would have become social workers, but they thought it paid too much. So I was very liberal when I went into journalism, and it was just sort of I think it's a left brain thing. People who are creative, who like to write, tend to be that kind of attitude, and they tend to be liberal. And then, of course, it's reinforced really toughly in the schools. I mean, I didn't have a course in journalism school that wasn't just pushing indoctrination. There was nothing that would have suggested, I mean, they didn't teach you things you really needed to know. It was disappointing, but it is true. I mean, for my career in journalism, I probably knew, let's say I knew 200 different reporters and editors, and I could count the genuine conservatives that I worked with in all those different newspapers on two hands. Really? Yes, sir.
I notice you don't use a teleprompter.
I've never been good at anything that tells me what to say. Yes.
Wondering how you transitioned from your liberal education to conservative philosophy.
Well, you know, that's a good question. There might be a real story in that if I could ever put it together, but I think it started happening when I was in Arizona. I grew up in Michigan, moved to Arizona. This editor that I had was a great guy and a conservative. and we used to have conversations, and I gradually discovered through his grilling of me that most of the opinions I had were off the rack. They had not been thought through. And then also I think that couples with when you have children and you start paying taxes and you see how the schools are being managed and you see how your taxpayer money is being managed. And I would guess though that the number one thing was that I have most of my life been contrarian. And so if you put me in a room with 100 liberals, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm going to go the other way. Because I've always thought the best stories in journalism are when everybody's running that way, go back that way. Because that's where you find another story that's better. And the whole herd mentality, the oppressive intolerance of political correctness, boy, don't get me started on that. But it is so oppressive in newsrooms, it is unbelievable. I think it would rival or maybe surpass what you find on college campuses. And that's saying a lot. I mean, people are afraid for what they say. The wrong word can destroy your career. It's horrible.
How did you have so much success in that environment? I mean, you worked in TV as well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you were so opposed to, if they were opposed to your viewpoints, how did you get promoted?
Well, mostly I got promoted by my work as a columnist and an editor, but the columns were successful with readers. And what I found is a lot of journalists write for the newsroom, and that's their circle of friends, and that everybody approves them, and it's a lovely life because everybody's patting you on the back and telling what a great story that was, and the readers are not impressed. But if you write for the readers, it's a different thing. So I really did have great support among the readers, and I think to some extent, the newsroom wanted somebody around as a sort of piñata. I mean, they do need a token conservative just to remind them what they hate. From time to time.
Peter,
Yes.
I don't think I've seen a thing come out that you've written on the web. I used to get, that RSS feed or something.
Yeah.
Have you done one recently?
Well, I was thinking about that while these bloggers were talking, and I was kind of beginning to feel guilty because I did have a blog for a long time. I did it for about 10 years at the Enquirer, and then I did it for another 2 years after I left the Enquirer. But I would have to say it was sort of like this hamster I had when I was a kid and died of neglect. I moved on because the whole blogging thing, and I have to hand it to these guys because it's a rough environment, and you get a lot of flack and you get a lot of hate mail. And to me, it was better for my mental health to just leave it, and I think it was better for the mental health of Cincinnati as well. So,
Well, I missed it.
well, thank you, Bob. Yes.
I saw today that Newsweek had a picture of Obama and it says Obama must go. Do you think this is going to be a turning point, or is that a game?
Yeah, that's a real interesting media phenomenon because Newsweek has been just so oppressively liberal for so long, but they're desperate too. And this is their cry for attention. However, it does, to me, represent too, and you probably read some of this in analysis, that it represents a real crack in the foundation of his liberal wall. And this is why you're seeing these liberals in the media are apoplectic about it, much more than they would be from any other source, because they know, hey, you're supposed to be on our team. It's more revealing of their bias and their assumptions than almost anything to see how they're attacking this guy. And they're really vicious. But the actual piece, I read it, it's well put together, I thought. I mean, he's just saying the obvious. He's a historian, and he's pointing out the broken promises and the failures, and it would be nothing on any conservative website, but because it's Newsweek, I think they're expecting a big surge of attention. But this is also something to think about as we're talking about taking back the media, is that when that kind of thing happens, it's a good idea for us to show our support. Because let's face it, this is, after all, a business. And you can only influence a little bit around the edges by canceling your subscription, but you can influence it a lot more by saying thank you or showing support when you see something good. Because reporters do remember that. And so that's the other side of the coin. Yes, sir.
Our liberal leaders in this country, it seems to me they must hate this country or they're communists. I mean, it just stumps me what they vote for.
Yeah, there's so many philosophical ways to look at that. One that I've been reading about lately is the contrast between moralism and relativism, which is like two entirely different philosophies, and they can't even communicate. Relativism is all about, if I feel it emotionally, it's right.
good.
You know, so you look at most of the foundations of liberal philosophy are based on emotion. The government should do this because it sounds good, makes me feel virtuous. And moralism, on the other hand, when you're pragmatic, all they hear when we open our mouths is that we're condemning them. So it's totally dysfunctional. The conversation it doesn't even exist, I don't think, at this point. The other thing I've kind of thought in studying or reading lately about the origins of communism and socialism is that you either believe that man can be God on earth, and that leads you to those systems which are horrible, or you believe that God was man on earth, and you know that we're fallen.
Right on, right on.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your columns when you was writing them. And it's just that the columnists they have now in the Enquirer just kept leaning, further and further right. And I couldn't take it anymore. I quit. But they didn't have but one columnist anyway, Walter Williams. And the only thing I don't understand is they know they're losing customers and losing money. Why do they continue to go that direction rather than trying to put some good columnists in there?
That's a great question, and it's been a mystery because there is, of all the politically correct pressure for diversity in a newsroom, and let me tell you, it's oppressive. There's one glaring blind spot, and that is diversity of opinion. They can't tolerate it. They won't tolerate it. They don't like it. On any given day, I might have been popular with a lot of Cincinnati with my columns, mainly because there were no other conservatives to read. But on any given day, if you're taking a vote in the newsroom, I would have lost my job. And they just cannot stand having a dissenting opinion. And to me, that is the kernel of what is really causing the decline of the media. Because the credibility is their franchise. Credibility is their platinum visa. Without that, they can't buy readers, they can't buy respect, and they've lost it. They sold it away. Really, over my career, I watched it get worse year after year, election after election. They just couldn't stand to be on the sidelines and report the game. They had to get in and play.
That's one of the things I like about your columns, because I always thought you spoke straight, and there's columns that I liked, and there's some columns you wrote I didn't agree with, you know what I mean? But I always felt that you spoke your mind.
Well, I didn't agree with some of my columns either.
I think I feel when I pick up the Cincinnati paper, it's more a version of Auto Trader. So from a business standpoint, where do you see this going? Because it's page after page after page of auto ads. Are these dealers supporting that? Supporting the paper?
That's a good question. The Auto Trader connection, what a lot of people don't understand about newspapers is that at one time, classified ads accounted for 1/3 of newspaper revenues. There are no classified ads to speak of. You remember when you used to get your Sunday paper and there was a whole fat section of classifieds? All those went to Auto Trader, Monster, Jobs.com, all these websites, and the newspapers didn't even see it coming. That's just a management failure. That's on a par with the auto companies who were decimated by the Japanese imports. It's a total lack of planning and foresight. So there you have a lot of the decline of newspapers started right there, and it continued. And the newspapers today, they are in a perfect storm of things that are conspiring against newspapers. To me, that's a terrible thing too, because where else are we going to go for good information about our township, our community, our school board, our units of government, our state government? Where are we going to go for objective information if the newspapers don't get back to doing their job? Because I like bloggers, they do a great job, but you know what? Just as these gentlemen said tonight, and this lady, they have an attitude, they have an opinion, they have an agenda. There has to be an impartial referee where everybody can share the same set of facts. And I think it's more evident than ever by our failure of civic civility that we don't share a set of facts anymore. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the polling where they they skew the statistics, which, by the way, puts me in the mind of Mark Twain quote, "Their lies, damn lies, and then their statistics." Is the media trying to delude themselves that they're right with this, or they're trying desperately to discourage the other side from coming out to the polls?
You know, it's a level of dishonesty that cannot be explained by mere accident or unintention. And it's so consistent. The only conclusion I have is that this is a way to, as you say, prop up the enthusiasm and confidence of their side and report what, it reminds me, honestly, we had a poll one time, a reader poll at the Tucson Citizen when I was working there. And I was a conservative editor of the editorial page, and the newsroom resented it. And we did this reader poll, and you know what the readers said? They said, "We love the editorial page, the rest of the paper's too liberal." You know what our news editor said? "We polled the wrong people." I said, "Yeah, we polled readers, right? Those are the right people." But no, she wanted to conduct another poll. So some people just cannot stand to see bad news. They don't want to see the truth. And in some ways, this can be a real advantage, as you noticed in the Wisconsin election, where the media had it so close and Scott Walker's going to be impeached and everything until you get there. It happened also in Kerry versus Bush. They had Kerry up way ahead. Lo and behold, he loses. So it can work, but to me, it's just one more example of the dishonesty. Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned it because I was being rude and talking in the back, but
I noticed that. That'll be in the story.
What sort of media do you read? What blogs, what websites do you go to in the morning when you wake up?
I spend about 5 minutes on the Enquirer. Then I take my blood pressure. Then I spend 20 to 30 minutes on the Wall Street Journal, depending on how much is in there that I want to read. I really like their editorial page. I mean, who would have guessed that it would be so popular to publish 3 whole pages of opinions and book reviews every day? You know, it's just wonderful. And then I go for websites I like. I go to Drudge just for the latest. I like Lucianne.com because it's really a big collector. Let's see, what else do I do? National Review Online is one of my favorites. A lot of good writers there. Big fan of Jonah Goldberg and Mark Stein because of their writing style. Then I have several others like Daily Caller, Washington Examiner. But I think I'm going to start reading some of these guys that were here tonight. I'm going to put them on my list.
I was always curious on the reasons why you left the Enquirer, because there's a lot of people here. You were the last bastion of conservatives. And once you left, soon after, I just quit the Enquirer. I couldn't take it anymore.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. It was not my choice. It was what they call in the business an involuntary separation, which means, which at first I was sort of like, oh, well, but I'm really happy that I have the faith in God that I have, because I really never worried. And I began to realize that I was sort of in one of those golden cages, where the benefits and the pay was good and I wouldn't leave, but I really was also struggling against that feeling that I just wasn't happy there. I wasn't wanted. You know what I mean? That you can tell when people don't want you around. And so since then, I've been much happier, much happier. And besides, the Enquirer had become, and even since then is worse when I talk to people who are still there, such a negative, bad place to be. People are constantly looking over their shoulders, waiting for the axe to fall. They're not happy. It's a very unhappy place.
So they wanted to get rid of their token conservative, is that it?
Yeah, they had to get rid of 100 liberals and me. I'd say it's a fair trade.
Just looking locally, just a couple examples. Cincinnati Bell, when their market that they were in forever and ever sort of changed on them. Cincinnati Bell changed who they were and kind of kept up with the marketplace. I look at companies like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video that when the market changed on them, they didn't adapt and they're either gone or struggling terribly right now. I think that the newspaper and print media market is changing like crazy right now. And I don't see the industry trying to turn into something else. So I'm feeling like they're gonna die soon. What's your feeling on that? Where are they going?
Well, if you judge, follow by history, you look at it, this is a dinosaur with 3 legs in the tar pit. If, as we used to say at journalism conferences even 15 years ago, if you were going to invent a way to disseminate instant information to people, it would not be throwing 2 pounds of dead trees in their driveway. It's old technology. It's yesterday. So I don't know where it's going. There's got to be a role, and there has to be some kind of high standards method in journalism to get the job done. You know, I puzzle about it. I do say, I think you're absolutely right that like a lot of industries, they were arrogant, they were lazy, they had huge revenue streams without lifting a finger from national advertisers and classified ads. I mean, you don't have to sell that stuff, it walks in the door. So it just became complacent, and more's the pity. I think 1 or 2, and then we probably should let people call it a night. Okay, sir, back here.
Do you know if the Enquirer has endorsed anybody yet, or is that a dumb question?
They no longer call me about that. Now, you know, really, they should.
I wish they would.
But listen, when they do, this is a good opportunity for you, all of you, to get active and jump in and join the debate. And if they make some stupid decisions, wow, get after them about it, because I'm fairly confident they will. Yes, sir.
I speak for myself, but I have a feeling I'm speaking for the room. I thank you for your time and your comments tonight. And my question is, will you come back and do it again with us?
How could I say no to that?